Welcome to the 20th episode of the Building Interactive website series, where we'll be making our first project. This project is a flashcards project, which will let us study concepts through flashcards, and it'll let us go through all of them, see which flashcard we're currently on, control which flashcard we're currently looking at through the previous and next buttons, and let us flip between the terms and definitions for each flashcard. This project will make use of several concepts in HTML and JavaScript that we've learned so far, as well as some CSS for extra styling and to make our flashcards and the website that it's in look nicer. The way we'll start is firstly by creating a doc type, and then an HTML tag, and then the necessary head and body tags to create a website. Next, we'll create a title, which is simply flashcards, because this is what the project is. Next, we'll start adding basic HTML to our body element. Firstly, we'll create an element that represents the flashcard itself. And to do this, we'll use a div element, which basically serves as a content division element that basically can hold anything that we want it to. In this case, it'll hold the terms and definitions for our flashcard. And we'll give it an ID of flashcard. And then we'll create a paragraph element below it telling us what's the number of the flashcard that we're currently on. We can call this card num indicator so that we can easily reference it in JavaScript. And then we can say currently on flashcard number 1 to start off with. Next, we'll be adding 3 button elements, which will be the previous button, the next button, and the flip button, which will cycle back to the previous card, move to the next card, and flip the card so that we can view both the terms and definitions, respectively. Next, we're going to add some styling to make the website look a bit nicer, as well as make the flashcard actually visible. Let's start with the body element. So firstly, we're going to change the background color using the background color property to light yellow to give a slightly tan paper look. After that, we're going to change the margins of the body element, making use of the margin property so that we make sure that the top margin is 32 pixels and the side margins and bottom margins are both 0, so that there's spacing on the top but none on the sides and from the bottom, just to give it a little bit of extra breathing room on the top. Next, we'll change the font family to a serif font to make it look more formal, as well as align the text to the center in order to center everything inside this content here. Next, we'll add some styling to the flashcard. So we select the flashcard element by making use of the hash ID selector. And the first thing that we're going to do is add a white background color to it in order to make it stand out from the background. Secondly, we'll add margin auto to it to make it align to the center. Since it's not a text element, text align doesn't work with it, meaning we have to evenly distribute the margins to both sides to make it align to the center. Next, we'll set the width to 250 pixels and the height to 150 pixels. This will give the flashcard a 5:3 aspect ratio, which is how standard flashcards are sized. We'll also give the flashcard a 1 pixel solid black border around it so that it stands out from the background a little bit more. And add 8 pixels of padding so that when text is displayed, it won't appear too close to the edges. And then finally, we'll adjust the font size by default to make it 24 pixels. We'll dynamically change this font size with JavaScript so that definitions of terms end up at a slightly lower font size than the terms themselves, which are going to be 24 pixels in size. Now that we're effectively done with styling, we can move on to the functionality of the flashcards. We'll first add a script tag so that we can insert JavaScript. Firstly, we're going to create arrays for the terms and definitions that the flashcards are going to have on them. I'll link these terms and definitions in the description so that you can just quickly copy and paste them. But you can also come up with your own terms and definitions as well and put them inside an array. Next, we'll add some non-constant variables which will tell us what exactly we're looking at. First, we'll create a variable that represents the index of the current card that we're looking at. It'll start at 0, meaning we'll be looking at the first card by default. Next, we'll create another variable which determines if the card is flipped or the definition is showing or not. We'll set that to false by default to make the term show up by default. Next, we'll create variables to access each of these 5 elements in the HTML here. So we'll start with the flashcard itself, and then use document.getElementById to access it. And we'll do the same thing for the card number indicator, the previous button, the next button, and the flip button. And while we're doing this, we can just make the flashcard show the current first term. Now we can start adding functionality to these 3 buttons. We'll start with the previous card button. We can add an event listener to watch for clicks. And the first thing that should happen when the previous button is clicked is subtract 1 from the current card and store the result back in the current card variable. This can also be shortened because we're just decrementing it by 1. So instead of saying current card equals current card minus 1, we can do current card minus equals 1. And because we're decrementing it by 1, there's a common shortcut that's used, which is just minus minus, which does exactly the same thing as what we had before. Just subtracts 1 from the current card variable. Now you might think that we can just run this statement again to change the term to the card before it, but the problem is if the current card is 0, then this statement will make it -1, and negative indexes in arrays are not allowed. So we have to add some code so that if the current card is -1, we have to set it to the index of the last item so that it'll properly loop over. So the way we can do that is by checking if new value of current card is equal to -1. And if so, we can set current card to the length of the terms array, or we can also do the definitions array because the terms and definitions arrays have the same length. But for simplicity, I'm just going to do terms.length, and we have to subtract 1 from it so that it properly accesses the last item and doesn't cause an array out of bounds error. Next, we have to make it so that this card number indicator shows us the card number of the new card that we're looking at. And so the way we can do that is by modifying its text content. And the way we can do this is by using template literals to interpolate the current card variable inside a string. So we need the hash symbol there and the period after it. And we have to do current card +1 so that the card numbers start at 1 and not 0. Because flashcard number 0 wouldn't really make sense to a casual observer. So now you can see if we click on previous, it cycles through each of these 4 terms. Next, we'll make it so that the card is not flipped internally. This will make it so that the script properly identifies that we're now looking at the term of the previous card and not the definition. And then from there, we can modify the flashcards text content so that it displays the current term using this exact same statement. And finally, we'll adjust the flashcards font size using .style.font_size so that it appears at a font size of 24 pixels. This is in case the definition is currently shown at a smaller font size, then we want to reset it to 24 pixels, which is what the term should appear at. The next button has similar functionality, so for the most part we can just copy and paste this and change pre-button to next button, but we have to make a few changes to the way that this works. So firstly, instead of -- here, we have to do ++ so that the current card value increments instead of decrements, so that it moves on to the next card instead of the previous card. Additionally, instead of checking if current card equals -1, we have to check if it's equal to terms.length, because then once it reaches terms.length, the index becomes out of bounds. So we have to keep it in bounds by making it loop back to the start. So set current card to 0. And then we can leave all these the same because this logic is just for displaying the new card. Finally, we'll add the functionality for actually flipping a card. So the way we'll do this is by adding a click event listener once again. And then what we'll do this time is make it so that card flipped becomes the opposite of card flipped. So if it's false, it'll become true, and if it's true, it'll become false. And so the way we can do this is by making use of the not operator, or the exclamation mark in front of card flipped, which we learned about in the previous video. And next we can use an if statement to figure out if a term should be displayed or a definition should be displayed. So the way we can do this is by using an if statement, and the condition is card flipped in this case. And then if the card is flipped, that means the term is on the back side and the definition is now on the front side, meaning we have to see the current definition. So we can just copy this statement here, except change terms to definitions. So that way it'll display the current definition instead of the term. And finally, for displaying the definition, we need to change the font size to 16 pixels. And now, as you can see, displaying definitions works perfectly. But right now, the flip button is more of a one-time thing. It doesn't really allow us to go back to the term. So in order to do that, we have to have an else after this if statement. And then this else will do pretty much the same thing, except it'll display the term instead of the definition. So we can actually copy these two statements from here, which will display the term, the current term. And so now if the card is flipped, the definition will show up at a smaller font size. And otherwise, the term will show up at a higher font size. So now you can see the flip button works perfectly, and we don't need to change the card number indicator because the card that we're looking at isn't changing. And so now you can see the project fully works, and we now have fully navigable flashcards that we can use to study. This concludes episode 20 of the Building Interactive Website series. Hopefully you learned something from creating a real-world project from the concepts we learned. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure to watch out for the next episode.